You prefer me to be looking at you?
Hello, Pauline. Hello, Rachel. Hello, Diana.
Hello.
Hi, how are you all?
Thank you for coming and joining us today.
Of course.
That's my pleasure.
That's okay. That's very nice.
We'll just start. See what happens.
Yeah.
I'd just like to invite you today to share a bit about your experience of coming out.
Coming out.
Coming out implies that you come out to somebody who probably it's news to.
I came out very young when I was in Melbourne, 14.
Well, I came out about the age of 15, I would say.
I think from being very young, I knew that I was more attracted to women, but I didn't do anything much about it.
I knew I was different. I didn't know the word gay back then. I just knew that I was interested in men or boys back at my age anyway. My first recollections was I was about 3 years of age, and I was at a dancing school with my elder brother, who's 16 months older than me, and there was a Eurasian pianist lady, and she used to get me to sit on the stool beside her, and she was my first crush. And my parents picked it up even then.
Even though I come from a very abusive childhood, I found this girlfriend. And so we started a relationship. Became very difficult because we were out in a very difficult situation in 60s in Melbourne. I had a very close girlfriend in Canberra though, but she wouldn't come out. But I was so far out that was unbelievable.
When I was at college, we all stayed in a dorm, 10 girls all staying there, studying at Teachers College. I was madly in love with this girl. I used to write her poetry, do her ironing for her. Now, that's just over the top. The interesting thing is that now I met her for the first time for ages. And I said, "Can you remember that I had a crush on you?" And she said, "Oh, yes." She said, "You kept sending me poems and doing things for me."
I guess my first sexual experience was at school, as probably a lot of kids. Although I quite enjoyed it, this is back in the 50s, and it was a very shameful thing. You couldn't really admit to it, and I don't think I admitted to it myself. I was continuing to go out with girls, but in the meantime I had a few gay experiences, so I sort of defined myself as bi.
I had a girlfriend. I need to prove to myself that I was straight or gay. Prove to my father that I was straight and butch, but it was never to be. I became Rachel, and that's where I am now.
I identified as bisexual for many, many, many years. I looked at that list at Meridian and I thought, that's a big list. I don't know which box to tick. Because all I was part of the movement, you were gay, lesbian or bisexual. I got asked it, and when I was in Queensland by a doctor, how do you identify? And I said, well, I'm bisexual, but it doesn't matter. It all depends who you love.
Have you heard the term pansexual?
Yes, I have. You want to answer that question for me?
I was in my 30s. I got married and had 2 children. It was when my children were at school, I realised that there were 2 women there who were living together and seemed very close, and I just suddenly got very brave and wrote a little note to one of them, who was actually my son's teacher. They were amazing and took me along. They introduced me to a lot of other women. They took me to women's dances. That was how it all started, I suppose. Not long after that, I actually told my husband. We stayed together for the children for quite a while, and it was a very friendly separation. He just said, "Don't tell any of my friends, will you?"
Well, I was accepted to be a little different to the rest of them right from the very early years of my life. Things being as they were just during the war and after the war, money wasn't plentiful, so my brother's clothes were handed down to me, so I was virtually dressed as a male
most of my younger days. My recollections have never been as a female. My siblings all accepted me. My father used to call me number 1.5 son, and Mum always referred to me as he and him, my son, which was great. Everybody around me knew, and they used to say I was just a tomboy and I'd grow out of it. And of course I never did.
I never came out to my parents. Think it's possible they suspected, but we never had any conversation about it.
My mother died quite young, so I didn't ever have to do that one. My father was a little bit older, but I had already moved in with this first long-term relationship. I didn't ever tell him exactly what was happening, and I don't think he would have quite got it anyway.
My wife actually was aware of this. She wasn't very happy, but I guess she thought she'd change me. And I suppose I continued to identify as bi, and then it gradually changed. If I met anyone outside the marriage, it was always a guy. I never came out to my children until much later. I was diagnosed HIV positive in 1984 when the tests first became available. It was considered a death sentence then. It was the days of the Grim Reaper ad. It was quite traumatic. Everyone diagnosed sort of had an expectancy that they might only live a couple of years. So my wife, Yanina, said, "Oh, well, I'll look after you," and she stuck with me. She never became positive, and life continued on. It wasn't until some of the stigma relating to HIV had subsided that I did come out to them a few years ago. And that was such an enormous weight off my mind, coming out to people.
I was 15 when I came out. I went to a gay party in Yarrawonga, of course. Didn't tell my mum and dad I was staying overnight. And all of a sudden, there was police knocking on this house door, asking if there was a Richard living in the house or at the house. So I went to the door. Here I am wearing my underwear only. So you can imagine what sort of party that was. The coppers at the door said to me, "Are you Richard Allen?" And I said, "Yeah, I'm Richard Allen." "Why, what's the problem?" "Well, we believe you were kidnapped." "Well, I'm not kidnapped. I'm here at a party." "Well, do you know you're in the company of homosexuals?" And I said, "Yeah." One of the coppers walked to the side and there was my brother right behind the copper, because my brother never knew I was gay. And he hated puss. Oh boy, did he hate puss. Then I was forced to go home to confront my mum and father. And the coppers were there and they told my mum and dad that I was in the house of disrepute. That was the word they used. And I said, no, I was with my friends. From that day on, I lost the respect of my father. He didn't respect me for who I was. I wasn't his son no more. He ended up dying 6 years later, but that was the hard part on me. My mother, well, she took it very hard. Wasn't easy coming out, wasn't easy at all. I didn't get the chance to say, I'm gay, I'm proud and whatever. The coppers done that for me.
I got posted off to Canberra when I was 16. The red carpet didn't come out when I came back. I was homeless. I was conflict with my family, and I was a single mother. And one of my family members said, I'm not going to pay tax to keep you and your kids. So I just pulled the pin. I said, I won't get benefits, and I overdosed. I came through that, and I went off working. I'm a bit of a tough cookie. I have to be tough, and that's why I'm still alive.
I think the generation of today and the future is much more brighter for them.
I think that they've got so much more freedom.
Oh, they're much more open, much more able to be open.
They can be out and proud, whereas we as younger gays couldn't do that.
We had to be resilient, we had to be stronger, we had to be protective for ourselves, and we had to look over our shoulders wherever we went, whatever we did.
We were hounded by the police, who would always try and, get some sort of a charge against you.
Male sex was illegal back then. It was sort of tolerated by police. I mean, there was a couple of sex on premises places in Melbourne that really weren't raided unless there was an election coming up.
Back in those days, if you're gay, faggot, tie-biter, you're guaranteed that you're going to be attacked or bashed or whatever.
When I was just starting to come out myself, we didn't really talk about it, or if we did, it was very secretive. You didn't show any physical warmth. You're not holding hands or doing anything like that in the open. You didn't ever talk about your partner as such. You talked about, we went and did this, but you never used the pronoun, and people just assumed it was still with my husband. I had a long relationship with one woman for about 17 years, and we went on lots of trips and all over the place. One of the things we found really difficult was checking into motels. They go, oh, sorry, we've given you a double room, we'll change you over, and we'll say, don't worry. And there's this immediate, and in some places it just wasn't worth it. So you say, fine, give us twin beds, that's okay.
I got attacked at the age of 13.
Knowing people's history and where we come from and where we are now, younger people just don't take it for granted. It's been a long process to get to the point where we're at. And it's very important for younger people with the LGBT community to understand that and respect it. And that's been a long, big battle.
It's made me stronger about being open. One of the first things that really helped me with that was 30 years ago when I joined the Canberra Gay and Lesbian Choir. It's a wonderful way of coming out to people. They say, oh, what do you do in your spare time? I say, oh, well, I sing with the Gay and Lesbian Choir, and everyone goes, ah! I felt really comfortable about doing that, and it was a very safe way of coming out to people. But I lost some friends. Some friends didn't want to have anything to do with me. I think they thought it was catching.
Coming out has been a continuing process, and I've not only had to come out as being gay. In the last 5 years as I've transitioned, I've had to come out again as in my female form. I'm very happy to say that I probably look a bit younger in my female form. I think the nails make a difference. It's the first time my daughter bought me nails. We both went and got nails done for my birthday, so that was very nice. First time I've had it done. My experience has been, in the last 5 years, very positive. The worst that's happened is I've had a few dirty looks, mainly from women. So I definitely feel a lot happier as a girl, yeah.
I had been working as a grease monkey in a garage, and I worked first as a female. When the garage closed down, I then applied for a job as a male, and I got it. So I worked as a male for 3.5 years at that job, and then I moved on and never looked back from then. My last job that I was with, I worked as a male, and I was with them for 35 years, and they never knew.
One of my big passions throughout my life is music. I started learning music when I was very little. I've sung in choirs all my life. 30 years ago I joined the Canberra Choir, and we've sung all over the world, and that's been really exciting. Quite recently we went to Munich in Germany, just before COVID hit. It was very good timing. About every 4 years we've gone to overseas places, to France, to Dublin, to America. The one in Munich was really very exciting because it's a gay and lesbian choral festival from people from all over the world. We sang in the town square. There were about 2,000 voices, and all the local people came and joined in, and that was stunning. That was really quite exciting.
I took up gliding, and I'm still a glider pilot, but all the guys in the Canberra Gliding Club, a lot of them are ex-defence or military, and I wasn't out to them, and some of the homophobic comments I heard would make your hair curl. I'm not full-time as Claire, I haven't presented at the gliding field as Claire, but I have told quite a few of my friends. I mean, I've known them for 20 years now, and I could tell which people would be accepting. So I've gradually come out to them, and I guess the word has spread to people that I don't know so well. I was very pleased to be able to achieve my gliding diamond badge, which involves a set of different tasks, and there's not too many of the glider pilots in Australia achieve their diamond badge, and it took me basically 18 years to get there. I'm still not quite sure why I was driven to do it, but I was, and here I am.
I competed for the gay scene openly, sailing in the gay games after repping in 56. I repped for Australia then again, and was successful with the gold and the bronze.
My drag name is Rachel, or better known as Raging Rachel, R&R, because I'm a rager and I like having fun. The big one, how I got into drag, I was at Blake Earls, just going on 16, and I met Rusty Nails and I met Gillette Razor. They were the two drag queens they were doing the show because they were ugly. And I thought, I think I could do that. Went home, Mum and Dad were out for the day, so I decided to go through my mother's wardrobe. Got out of the bra, got out of the dress, got into the makeup, and you want to know what ugly drag was? Well, that was fucking ugly drag. But the worst part about that, Mum and Dad came home a little bit early. So I jumped out the bedroom window and took off like nobody's business. I do drag, but I'm not perfect drag. I'm a comedy drag, and I like to make people laugh, because when you hear the stories of some of the people, I think we need more laughter and more love and caring. And I decided that when I do drag, I've always got 2 left feet. I like to stuff up the number, like, you know, doing Burn Baby Burn. That was the number I did on stage at a nightclub called Heaven. I put a baby in the pram and put it on fire. They brought the house to a halt. Got into trouble because it set the fire alarms off. Nothing major. But yet, the crowd was just absolutely over the moon. Doing drag was fun. And I think Rachel's, to me, is my protector. She protects Richard.
Do you want to ask me any questions about the sex industry?
I can ask you questions about the sex industry. I'm sure I can.
Well, that was in the 80s, very full-on in Canberra. I worked at the same studio for 4 years. No other income except that. About a member for WISE, Workers in Sex Industry Employment. And it encompasses a lot of things. The legislation about safe sex within studios, to implement that with condoms. Even though your employment might be that, it's about when you're safe, when you're not at work. I'm very proactive with same-gender relationships. I fought for women's rights. People don't realise how hard people like me stood in that line with nothing in Canberra to fight for people to have rights and same-gender rights.
I originally trained as a teacher and I worked with preschool children. Because both my children were born with severe disabilities, I realised I needed a bit more work and study to try and manage, because I was being asked to counsel other parents and talk to them and run groups, and I didn't feel I had the skills, so I went back to university and did a psychology degree. And I've been working as a child psychologist for about 50 years or something. That has given me a great deal of pleasure, and I'm very proud of what I've done. I brought the Protective Behaviours program to Canberra to help children to talk about sexual abuse, and that's now just a normal thing as part of every school in Canberra. And I feel very proud of what I've done in that.
I've been a volunteer of the AIDS Action Council for roughly 33 years. Back in those days we had the HIV virus around.
When the Grim Reaper campaign was on and people were dying all over the place, there was definitely a lot of discrimination. You couldn't mention to someone that you were HIV positive without them recoiling in horror.
No one wanted to look after the people who were dying with HIV/AIDS. Not even the nurses, the doctors. They left the food at the door, didn't want to touch a patient at all. The care teams, they just went in there and sort of either took them to the bathroom, brushed their hair, wiped their face, show them the love. You know, they aren't forgotten. Opening up the AIDS Garden of Reflection was my pride and joy. It was really dedicated to my partner, who died in '94. He passed away in my arms. And that was on the 11th of the 11th of '94. So the AIDS Garden of Reflection is his honour for him, because I wanted to bring him home. So I've got a very busy life. And am I ready to retire? No. I got too much living to do. Too much living.
The main thing I'm really concerned about is ageing within the community and about appropriate care.
It's much harder as you get older to be able to live a normal lifestyle, as I compare a normal lifestyle.
People looking at you and thinking that somehow you're not as clever as you used to be, you're not as aware as you used to be. Also putting you in a very, obviously I've got children, or I had children, so therefore I must have been married, and it was all very traditional, and I find that quite hard.
For anybody that wasn't in my position, that had lived a similar lifestyle to me, the thought of having to go into a heterosexual nursing home environment would be terrible.
I have just moved into a facility for older people. I was really nervous about doing that. I just didn't know how I'd fit into that.
I guess there's three areas where there's potential for discrimination and stigma. First is being gay, and then being HIV positive came with a lot of stigma, and being trans.
I notice even when I go to hospital for specialist appointments and that, I'm treated differently because I don't have a partner, so I'm doing solo. It's a lonely trip, and if you don't have that support, and it's very important for me to have appropriate care and appropriate support.
Well, the place I'm staying at, I'm living at, does have regular things, pride celebrations, all sorts of little things, and it's quite openly talked about that there are things like that. It's still very gender stereotyped in lots of ways. But I've been quite open. I said, as I walk out with my ukulele, I say I'm playing with the gay and lesbian ukulele band, and their mouths drop open a bit, but they're getting used to it.
One of my trans friends told me she was sent for respite at a Canberra place and appeared for to get orientation about the place as female, and the head nurse or whoever was showing her around said, "I hope you're not turning up to dinner looking like that."
I think firstly they've got to be accepting and understand that, probably a lot of the trauma that some elderly people, gay people, they experience and they suffer, knowing that, they're in an environment that isn't like-minded and are not as comfortable as what they're used to.
I think it's just caring and listening. Just maybe checking up on people sometimes, not letting it just slide, because I've lost people to HIV, and I had domestic violence, and it's very prevalent about being older and not being safe.
Leave your pride at the door. Just treat them as you would treat any other. Just because what they do behind their closed doors, it's nothing to do with you. They deserve all the love and care they can get. There's no different in this world, no different whatsoever. They're just different because they were born different.
I really believe that staff should be trained to accept people's sexuality and be able to understand and be compassionate.
And it's crucial that in the LGBT community that we need that support down the road to heaven or hell, wherever you're going to go.
Having a welcoming and accepting environment where you're able to have friends and guests visit would be very important. If I could have one particular carer or a group of carers who understood me and knew me, I think that'd be really good. It's going to take a lot of acceptance by those organisations that people can live different lifestyles.
Some people are still sexually active, even at my age. Not past it. Haven't been there for a while, but...
On the dating sites, I put my age as 102, which sadly is sort of getting to the stage. I'm getting closer to it than I'd like to think about.
So much of people not feeling comfortable is because they don't know them. They don't know them as people. Once you get to know people, you know, whether they have a disability or whether they are trans or whatever, or whether they're a lesbian, once you get them to know them as a person, it's very different. We're all people and we all have things to offer.
You've got to understand, you've got to be less biased, you've got to be more understanding. You know, people are different, we're not all the same. You know, like, look at me. I'm a cock in a frock, for God's sake. You know, you won't see me every day like this. Thank God for that. I can't cope. I can't put my nuts away for so long.
The future's a bit uncertain. I had this role as a carer for 20 odd years. She died in May. She had Parkinson's for 15 years, and I was her full-time carer. And I have to decide what my life's going to look like from now on, so it's a bit of a confusing time.
This is Jetty. I got her after I lost my wife, and she's the new lady in my life. And she belonged to a friend of mine when I was younger on the gay scene. There were three of us got together and we were called the Three Musketeers. And we all dressed as men. And Bobby was her owner, and I hadn't seen or spoken to Bobby for over 50 years and found out where he was, and he was in Melbourne. I went down to visit him, and he lived as a man. He was very ill, and he had this little chihuahua. And I said to him, "Don't worry about Yeti, I'll look after her." When Bobby passed away, I was still living in Sydney, and I drove down the following day, and I've had Yeti now for nine and a half years. And we are so devoted, the two of us.
One of the thoughts that went through my head when I got married was, it's not viable living life as a gay person. I knew a number of gay people and they didn't seem to be terribly happy. But if I could go back and tell myself then, yes, it is viable, you can live your life the way you want and it will be more accepted in the future, I think maybe I would have lived a different life.
I'd like to have had the opportunity to do a full transition. Back in the 60s, that wasn't an option. There had been men that had transitioned overseas, and then Carlotta, of course, but she didn't fully transition till later on in the 60s. As for females, that hadn't been sort of investigated or pursued or followed through. If I had the opportunity, I would have transitioned fully, yeah.
I'd be very proud of what Richard has done, where he's been and what he's done. You've come a long way being who you are and fought for what you wanted. And now you can stand up and be proud of who you are.
I tell them that it's okay to be much more open and to be really who you are.
I just think the younger generation of today, they need to stand proud, be proud, walk high and carry a lot of courage. they're going to be so much stronger. They're going to have a power to win their life. They'll make us proud for who they are and what they will be today.
Well, thank you so much for joining us.
All right.
I think that's
That's
right.
so cool. Thank you so
Oh, you're
much
right.
for sharing your story with us.
Thank you.
Thank you.
I enjoyed it.
You watch the camera, girlfriend.
People say, well, you're not your typical 80-year-old. I am 80.
That's just shocked me too.
Oh, thank you.
I've got a cousin that's a screaming queen. My mother and my aunt took the two of us, Brian and myself, to a psychiatrist. The psychiatrist turned around and he said, well, Brian's definitely homosexual and Lane's a lesbian. Mum said, oh yeah, okay. And then he said, you know what I'm saying? Lane's homosexual. And she said, no, Lane's a girl. Only men are homosexuals.
You don't have aged care drag queens.
Well,
not yet.
Not yet.
Not with fucking tits like this.
We need an aged care drag queen.
Oh, no, you don't. I done drag shows with aged cones. Done a drag show up at Ainsley, and I broke a heel hopping around on stage on one leg. That wasn't easy.
It's like when I see he used to be a client of mine. When I see him on TV, I go, hello.
Somehow I don't think we'll be able to use that.
I know, but
We've heard this story before and
I thought I'd throw it in though.